the scorching twin suns of Pallas V beat down relentlessly, painting the cracked, ochre landscape in shades of burnt umber and rusted crimson. A perpetual haze of fine red dust, stirred by the ceaseless currents of alien commerce, hung heavy in the air. Within the sprawling, sun-baked market district, a cacophony of guttural barks, high-pitched chirps, and the occasional synthesized human curse echoed between the makeshift stalls. The scent of exotic spices, synthetic fuels, and something vaguely metallic mingled with the grit that seemed to permeate every molecule of existence here. Inside the oasis, a dimly lit cantina with synthale sloshing on every sticky surface, Porter Niffin wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. His flight suit, an unfortunate testament to countless hyperspace jumps and dubious cargo hauls, bore the stains of 1,000 alien worlds. He nudged a half-empty bottle across the scarred tabletop towards Carter, his co-pilot, whose brow was already furrowed in a familiar pre-hangover scowl. "Another day on Pallas V, Carter," Porter drawled, his voice a low rumble. "Where the only thing hotter than the sun is the deal you're about to get fleeced on." Carter grunted, pushing a stray strand of sandy hair from his eyes. "You're still certain about those xylose crystals, Porter?" They felt unusually vibrant during loading, like they were humming Ode to Joy in a minor key. Across from them, Damiender, their ship's engineer, chuckled, a mischievous glint in her eyes. She always found the chaotic rhythm of Pallas V utterly delightful. Vibrant means alive, Carter. Or at least, passionately inert. Either way, more interesting than sterile space rock. Damie took a long, exaggerated sip from her synthale, her gaze drifting towards a particularly dim corner of the cantina. "Speaking of interesting, look at Gari Goni's congregation over there." Porter followed her gaze. In the booth, a group of Garonians, multi-eyed beings with leathery scales and 6 prehensile limbs, were engaged in a rather theatrical display. One, unmistakably Gari Goni, clutched a rather sad, half-empty bottle of cheap, potent human moonshine. He cradled it with the reverence one might reserve for a relic unearthed from King Tut's tomb, his numerous eyes wide and fixated on the label, which featured a faded image of a grinning, slightly deranged human. Still performing his nightly spiritual awakening. "I see," Porter commented, a smirk playing on his lips. "Those spiritual agony, there might be a more accurate description, given their usual reaction to that rock gut." Gari Goni, with an almost agonizingly slow motion, uncorked the bottle. His mandibles clicked softly, a sound that Porter had come to associate with everything from profound hunger to profound philosophical debate amongst Garonians. He poured a small, amber liquid into a tarnished, dented cup, a cup that looked suspiciously like a discarded human souvenir mug from a long-lost spaceport. The other Garonians in the booth murmured, a low, resonant hum of anticipation. "He certainly got the ceremonial flair down," Carter observed, a flicker of amusement crossing his usually stoic face. "The solemnity rivals a papal blessing." Gari Goni then, with a dramatic flourish that would make any Shakespearean actor proud, downed the shot. His 6 eyes immediately bugged out. His scales, usually a mottled brown, rippled through a spectrum of greens and purples. A guttural gurgle escaped his throat, and he lurched violently, stumbling backward until his head thudded against the back of the booth. He lay there, twitching, a small, pained moan escaping his lips. His companions, however, did not rush to his aid. Instead, they watched with an almost ecstatic reverence. Damie let out a snort of laughter. Is that the Garonian equivalent of speaking in tongues? Or just bad tequila? After a moment that felt like an eternity, Garigoni slowly, agonizingly, pushed himself upright. His many eyes, though still somewhat unfocused, now held an expression of profound, albeit nauseated, serenity. He swayed slightly, then extended a quivering limb towards Porter, his voice raspy but imbued with an undeniable, if misguided, awe. The human, the prophet Niffin, he truly comprehends the path. He embraces the sacred poison nightly, a testament to his unbreakable spirit. Porter felt a sudden, cold knot in his stomach. Sacred poison? The phrase hung in the air, heavy with a fresh, bewildering absurdity. He considered his own liver, which had seen more toxic depressants than a medical waste facility, and thought, sure, my organs call it poison. But sacred? That's a new one. He realized, with a dawning horror, that he had stumbled upon something profoundly, hilariously, and terrifyingly misinterpreted. Later, the air outside tasted of desert dust and the faint metallic tang of alien waste processing. Porter found himself reluctantly trailing Garigoni through a labyrinthine alleyway, the Garonian practically vibrating with fervent conviction. The high priest awaits, Prophet Niffin, Garigoni proclaimed, his voice echoing oddly in the narrow passage. Your wisdom of the morning atonement is desperately sought after. Such profound suffering must yield ultimate clarity. Morning atonement, Porter muttered under his breath, wondering if he was being punked by a highly advanced alien civilization. Sounds like every Sunday morning back on Earth, just with less existential dread and more cold pizza. He'd accepted Garigoni's invitation only after Dammy had promised him a week's worth of free synthale if he brought back a detailed ethnographic report. Carter just gave him a look that said, "You're a madman, Porter, but Godspeed." That temple, it turned out, was a repurposed cargo container nestled between a sputtering hydroponics farm and a dubious scrap metal dealership. The interior, dimly lit by a few flickering bioluminescent fungi, smelled faintly of stale fermented grains, unwashed scales, and something that reminded Porter of forgotten pub carpets. Crude altars, fashioned from overturned shipping crates, were adorned with empty liquor bottles, mostly human brands, Porter noted with a sinking feeling, crumpled snack wrappers, and what appeared to be a revered human bar mat, emblazoned with the faded image of a grinning space ape holding a banana. Other Garonians sat cross-legged, some swaying gently, others with their multiple eyes closed in what appeared to be expressions of intense, involuntary pain. This is just a terribly decorated dive bar, Gari, Porter whispered, his voice hushed. Hardly the cathedral of Chartres. A harking Garonian, whose scales were an even deeper shade of ochre, slowly approached Porter. This, apparently, was the high priest. Its form trembled slightly, its many eyes fixed on Porter with an unnerving intensity. It held aloft a cloudy, viscous liquid in a cracked ceramic mug, raising it like a sacred chalice. Prophet, the high priest boomed, its voice a gravelly rumble that seemed to shake the very container. We prepare for the divine stupor. Tell us, in your boundless wisdom, what blessings does the first vomit bestow upon the truly faithful? Porter felt a desperate urge to either laugh hysterically or run screaming into the desert. The first vomit, he thought, I usually just called that Tuesday night at university. He cleared his throat, trying to compose himself, channeling every ounce of his ingrained human sarcasm into a semblance of profound spiritual guidance. Well, High Priest, Porter began, choosing his words with exaggerated care, that he can't at the first vomit, it is indeed a profoundly powerful cleanse. A forceful expulsion of not merely physical impurities, but also spiritual doubts. A true purification. It is a necessary step, a trial by fire, or rather, by ill-stomach acid, that allows one to truly appreciate the ensuing clarity and the blessed quiet that follows. He punctuated his sentence with a solemn nod, wondering if he sounded sufficiently profound or merely like a particularly eloquent barfly. The Garonians nodded solemnly, a wave of understanding passing through them. Some even dabbed at their multiple eyes, wiping away what might have been tears of revelation. One younger Garonian acolyte, barely managing to remain upright, suddenly seized a full bottle of the vile moonshine. "I, too, shall achieve the blessed quiet," the acolyte slurred, his voice thick with devotion and nascent intoxication. "For the prophet. For the sacred poison." The acolyte, with a zeal that far outstripped his common sense, chugged the entire bottle. He gagged spectacularly, his scales cycling through a frantic rainbow of colors before collapsing in a heap, twitching faintly. A wave of genuine, soft horror washed over Porter. This was no longer just funny. These beings were genuinely harming themselves, believing they were performing a sacred act. His usual sarcastic detachment began to crack under the weight of this bizarre, self-inflicted devotion. This was less a comedic misunderstanding and more a tragedy unfolding with a laugh track. Suddenly, a blaring siren ripped through the thin walls of the cargo container, a piercing shriek that cut through the haze of religious fervor. Red and blue lights flashed erratically through the cracks, painting the interior in an urgent, strobing glow. Heavy, rhythmic thuds vibrated through the floor, indicating the approach of alien security forces. A heavily synthesized voice, barking in a guttural alien tongue, blared from outside. "Illegal substance consumption detected. Open this unit immediately. Unauthorized ritual assembly." Panic erupted amongst the Garonians. The high priest, moments before so stoic, now looked utterly terrified, his many eyes darting wildly. The infidels. They scorn the sacred poison. Prophet, save us from their sobriety. They seek to deny us the divine path to enlightenment through extreme dehydration. Porter, for a fleeting moment, almost felt sorry for them. "Sobriety is the least of your worries, High Priest," he muttered, grabbing Garigoni by one of his surprisingly strong, scaly arms. "You'll be detoxing in an intergalactic holding cell for a month, and trust me, that's no path to anything but a really bad attitude." He spotted a loose panel in the back of the cargo container, almost entirely obscured by a pile of empty scent kegs. "Gari, this way," Porter commanded, his voice sharp with urgency. "The divine stupor is about to get a whole lot less divine and a lot more a federal detainment." He shoved Garigoni through the panel, then scrambled after him, the sound of blaster fire now echoing from the front of the container. They tumbled out into a narrow, sand-blown alleyway, the grit immediately finding its way into every seam of Porter's flight suit. Security drones, sleek and predatory, already patrolled overhead, their pursuit beams scanning the chaotic marketplace. "The prophet leads us to new enlightenment," Garigoni gasped, surprisingly agile despite his recent spiritual tribulation. "A holy chase. Like the legend of Dionysus pursued by the teetotaling titans." "A holy chase, he calls it," Porter muttered, dodging a fruit vendor's stall, sending alien produce scattering. "I call it running for my life because a bunch of aliens think I'm the messiah of moonshine. Remind me to send Dammy a bill for my therapy." A security drone's pursuit beam locked onto them, a high-pitched whine announcing its imminent strike. "Move it, Gari," Porter yelled, pushing the smaller alien ahead. Less worship, more running. Unless you want to spend the rest of your life contemplating the meaning of no bail. They burst out onto a bustling landing pad, the air thick with the exhaust fumes of dozens of starships powering up for departure. Porter's eyes scanned frantically, finally landing on the familiar, slightly dented silhouette of the desert wanderer. Carter and Damiander were already at the open cargo bay, frantically securing the last of their xylos crystals. "Carter! Dammy!" Porter roared, his voice hoarse from the dust and exertion. "Get us out of here. And clear the cargo bay. We've got spiritual baggage." Carter spotted them, his eyes widening in alarm, then a flicker of bewildered amusement. He immediately signaled Dammy, who hit the switch for the loading ramp. Porter shoved Garigoni up the ramp, then scrambled aboard himself just as alien security forces swarmed onto the landing pad, their blasters charged and ready. "What in the name of the Galactic Council did you do, Porter?" Dammy exclaimed, her expression a mix of awe and exasperation. Porter leaned against a bulkhead, catching his breath. "Long story short, Dammy, I'm apparently the new Bacchus. Or perhaps the patron saint of regrettable decisions. Either way, they believe my drinking habits are the key to universal enlightenment." Inside the now sealed cargo bay, Garigoni looked at Porter with an unwavering, fervent devotion. His multiple eyes still held the glazed, serene quality of a true believer. "The Prophet has delivered us," Garigoni declared, his voice echoing in the confined space. "The sacred poison shall endure, its mysteries revealed by the human spirit." Porter sighed, running a hand over his face, a gesture of profound weariness. "He still doesn't get it, does he?" he murmured, more to himself than to his crew. "Maybe he never will. Maybe that's the point. We humans, with our weird, self-destructive rituals, our inexplicable fun, and our occasional, accidental messiah complexes. We really are something else." He glanced from Garigoni to Carter and Dammy. A small, reluctant smile played on his lips. "All right, Gari," Porter said, pushing himself off the bulkhead. "How about we try a different kind of sacred ritual? One involving actual fruit juice. And maybe a documentary about why we invented coffee. It's a much less painful path to enlightenment, trust me. Less vomiting, more existential clarity without the nausea." Garigoni blinked his many eyes, then slowly, thoughtfully, nodded. His expression remained hopeful, if still profoundly confused. Porter just shook his head, a mix of exasperation and grudging, weary affection. But the desert wanderer rumbled, then surged forward, lifting off from Pallas V, a tiny speck against the vastness of space. Satisfying? Porter thought, as the stars began to smear into warp trails. Not really, no. But at least I wouldn't have a hangover in the morning. And on Pallas V, that was probably as close to true spiritual enlightenment as anyone was ever going to get. The crimson glow of a dying star bled through the primary view screen of the Terran cruiser Stardust Serenade, casting long, skeletal shadows across the observation deck. Commander Anya Sharma ran a hand through her closely cropped hair, the faint hum of the ship's engines a familiar lullaby after weeks in the void. Below, the sprawling, chaotic orbital docks of Xylos Prime pulsed with the raw energy of interstellar commerce. 1,000 alien species, 1,000,000 transactions, and a galaxy of potential threats. Somewhere amidst that swirling maelstrom of light and carbon particulate, it had made its move. The shapeshifter, an entity of silent malice and unparalleled mimicry, had waited patiently. It had stalked this Terran vessel for days, a phantom in the data streams, an invisible whisper at the edge of sensor arrays. It had meticulously catalogued every movement, every subtle shift in atmospheric pressure, every human utterance, the incessant babble, the restless energy, the peculiar habit of constantly touching their surroundings as if to confirm the solidity of existence itself. Humans were peculiar, yes, but undeniably potent. Fragile bodies, even more fragile minds, yet they had somehow infected the galaxy with their presence, building these armed and armored behemoths capable of crossing oceans of stars. Its mission was distilled to a single, elegant directive: infiltrate, sabotage, and vanish, leaving behind only a cold void where the Stardust Serenade once floated. The humans would never even grasp the nature of the touch that had extinguished them. During a routine docking transfer, amidst the controlled chaos of cargo pods and personnel shuttles, the creature drifted aboard. It was nothing more than a shimmering distortion, a ghost of light and motes of carbon dust, slipping past energy shields and biometric scanners designed to catch flesh and bone, not a thought made manifest. It materialized in a dimly lit storage bay, its formlessness shedding away. It began to twist, compress, and shape itself, a grotesque ballet of biological replication. Slowly, agonizingly, it became Lieutenant Hayes, one of the ship's unassuming, perpetually tired, midshift officers. Skin grew, taking on the exact sun-weathered tone. Hair sprouted, precisely matching the sandy blonde hue. Blood began to pump, breath hitched, perfectly imitating the erratic rhythm of human life. Even his voice, the smallest scar above his left eyebrow, the rough calluses on his hands from years of navigating ship consoles, all replicated with chilling fidelity. When it emerged from the cargo bay, it wore the human like a second skin, a costume of flesh tailored to perfection. The crew noticed nothing amiss. They greeted Hayes with the casual nods of familiarity, the easy smiles that signified shared purpose and endless hours in the void. "Morning, Hayes," a technician mumbled, hurrying past. "Rough night?" asked another, gesturing vaguely at the shift change. The alien responded in kind, every gesture rehearsed, every vocal inflection precisely modulated from hours of dispassionate observation. It sipped the bitter, scorching coffee in the mess hall, forcing itself to swallow the tasteless protein rations, enduring the small talk about homeworlds it had never seen, concepts it had never comprehended. It was flawless. It fooled them all. The Stardust Serenade was now its. The shapeshifter prowled the ship's corridors, its borrowed human eyes cataloging security panels, its replicated ears marking the rhythmic thrum of the engine cycles, its alien mind shaping the intricate plan that would see the Terran vessel dark, lifeless, and adrift in the cold vacuum. Each step it took, each circuit it traced through the ship's arteries, brought it closer to an inevitable, silent triumph. The pride of the Terran fleet reduced to a derelict tomb. And then it entered the common room. The space hummed with the low din of human off-duty hours. A few crew members were hunched over data slates, others engaged in spirited, nonsensical debates about sports scores from forgotten Earth seasons. Across a worn, synthetic leather chair, as if it owned the entirety of the Stardust Serenade, was Muffin, the ship's cat. The alien's eyes, borrowed from Lieutenant Hayes, slid over the creature with profound disinterest. To its species, animals were beneath notice, simple organisms, lacking sentience, neither prey nor predator worth a single thought. It dismissed the cat as utterly irrelevant, nothing more than an odd, illogical Terran eccentricity. A mistake. A fatal, microscopic error. The air recycling system, a silent, efficient marvel of Terran engineering, pushed a faint, invisible swirl of particulate across the common room. Particles of fur, microscopic fragments of shed skin, the subtle detritus every feline carried and released into its immediate environs. The shapeshifter, still wearing the perfectly replicated lungs of Lieutenant Hayes, took one slow, deliberate breath. And doom, in the form of a million invisible allergens, settled into its borrowed respiratory system. At first, the sensation was subtle, a faint tickle in the throat, an almost imperceptible prickle across the skin it wore so flawlessly. The alien, unfamiliar with such organic frailty, ignored it. Its true species did not experience illness, did not comprehend the fragility of organic tissue, the microscopic skirmishes that constantly ravaged lesser forms of life. But the sensation intensified, a strange, burning fire spreading through its borrowed lungs, a constriction it could not control, tightening around its very essence. Its skin, Lieutenant Hayes' skin, flushed an alarming, vibrant red. Its eyes burned with an unexpected, profound irritation, vision blurring with sudden, uncontrollable liquid. It tried to stand taller, to mimic the composure that was Hayes' usual demeanor, but its body betrayed it. A violent spasm seized its diaphragm. A sudden, explosive blast of air tore from its nose and mouth, uncontrollable, shockingly loud, a roar, primal force that rattled its very core. A sneeze. The common room fell silent. Crew members looked up from their games, from their meals, from their debates. Lieutenant Hayes, reliable, steady, controlled Hayes, yet here he was doubled over, gasping, shaking as another convulsive sneeze racked his fabricated frame. And another. And another. Each involuntary spasm ripped through the perfect disguise, tearing at the microscopic seams of the carefully woven mimicry. Hives, angry red welts, rose across its skin, a furious revolt of alien flesh against foreign proteins. Its throat wheezed, producing a strangled, rattling sound that was utterly unlike Hayes' usual voice. Its eyes swelled, spilling hot, indignant tears that streamed down its fabricated face, blurring its vision into an indistinct, aqueous mess. The alien, a being that had faced the crushing vacuum of space, endured the searing heat of plasma storms, and survived vacuum burns that would vaporize lesser life forms. This was a torture it had never conceived. A humiliation beyond comprehension. It tried to flee, to retreat, to regain control of its failing form. But Muffin, the ship's cat, seemed to sense its distress. The feline leapt lightly from its chair, landing with an almost predatory softness, and padded closer, its tail flicking with what appeared to be harmless curiosity. To the human crew, it was a familiar, comforting gesture. To the shapeshifter, it was death incarnate, a tiny, furry harbinger of microscopic doom. Each delicate step the cat took released more of the invisible, potent poison into the air. The shapeshifter staggered back, desperate, panicked, but the more it inhaled, the worse the spasms became, an unbearable agony tearing at its stolen flesh. Its body rippled. For a single, agonizing heartbeat, the disguise faltered. The skin of Lieutenant Hayes flickered, shimmering with hints of its true, amorphous form beneath, a sickening distortion, a grotesque, gelatinous outline struggling, failing, to hold its perfect human shape. Gasps rose from the crew. The truth, stark and horrifying, spread across their faces. Haze was not haze at all. The alien knew, with a certainty that transcended its physical agony, that the mission was irrevocably lost. It tried to stabilize, to focus, to rebuild the mask of flesh and blood, but every breath it took was another suffocating assault. More sneezes, each one a tearing shriek of betrayal. More convulsions, its stolen body rebelling against its will. The perfection of its mimicry, the culmination of millennia of evolutionary stealth, had utterly collapsed under something no intelligence in the galaxy, no weapon, no sensor, had ever conceived: an allergic reaction. The crew reacted with trained, chilling swiftness. Security officers, their faces grim, surged forward, energy weapons drawn and humming, their actions precise and economical. They pinned the writhing, dissolving figure to the deck, its form unraveling like a cheap garment. Within moments, the mimicry shattered entirely, revealing the alien beneath, a shifting, fluid being, collapsing, quivering, a grotesque puddle of organic matter brought low by the weight of microscopic particles. It screamed, a silent, internal shriek of pure, unadulterated humiliation and disbelief, as they forced its mottled, spasming form into a containment field. It was not plasma fire, not the crushing void, not any weapon of war that had undone it. It was a house pet. A tiny, furry, purring, innocuous house pet. Hours later, Commander Sharma stared at her data slate, the captain's report stark and unbelievably brief. Enemy infiltration attempt detected. Shapeshifter neutralized. Cause of failure, ship's cat, muffin. The log ended there, as simple and unambiguous as a checklist. But the story would spread, an insidious whisper across the Terran fleet, passed from ship to ship, system to system, of an enemy spy, an apex infiltrator, undone not by human vigilance, not by advanced weaponry, but by something smaller, stranger, and quintessentially human: the unexpected, potent bond with a companion animal, and the shared, ancient curse of allergies. In her quarters, Commander Sharma absently stroked Muffin's soft fur as the cat purred contentedly in her lap, a tiny, vibrating engine of satisfaction. Outside the viewport, the endless stars wheeled silently by, indifferent to the fact that an entire empire of shapeshifters now whispered urgent warnings about the peculiar dangers of Terran vessels and their inexplicably potent, furry guardians. The interrogation chamber was a pristine, metallic oval, devoid of warmth or shadow. Its surfaces gleamed under a harsh, sterile light that seemed to leach all color from the air. A low, rhythmic hum, the pulse of unseen machinery, was the only sound. Cathar, Chief Warden of Detention Block 7, stood before the reinforced viewport, his 6 multifaceted eyes fixed on the human strapped into the restraint chair. His chitinous plating, honed to a razor sheen, reflected the cold glow of the room. Cathar and his caste prided themselves on their craft. They were the galaxy's most efficient truth seekers, the ultimate architects of compliance. They had meticulously catalogued the breaking points of countless species, from the methane-breathing silicon life forms of Kepler's drift to the crystalline sentience of the Veil Nebula. Pain, they understood, was the universal language. Fear, its loyal interpreter. Given sufficient time and application, any prisoner, regardless of their resolve, eventually bent to their will. Catha regarded the human with the same certainty. Fragile bones, a delicate lattice beneath soft, yielding flesh. The prisoner's skin, a pale, almost translucent hue, seemed barely capable of containing the tumultuous currents of its internal biology. weak. This one, with its absurdly expressive facial features and exposed nervous system, would not last long. The assessment was precise, infallible. The procedure began. From the sterile console, a series of measured electrical impulses coursed into the human's nervous system, carefully calibrated to maximize agony without causing permanent, immediate damage. Microneedles, finer than a hair's breadth, pressed themselves into the skin at key pressure points, delivering targeted bursts of sensory overload designed to flood the prisoner's mind with an unbearable symphony of torment. The chamber air grew thick with the unspoken tension, the expectation of the inevitable. The expected responses were clear, a predictable litany of despair, screaming, roar and guttural, sobbing, wrenching and desperate, frantic, incoherent pleas for release, for cessation, for any form of mercy. These were the standard notes in Cathar's grim repertoire. But instead, the human laughed. At first, it was a small sound, a startled chuckle, half swallowed, trembling slightly around the edges of what was clearly intense discomfort. Cathar's many eyes narrowed, his mandibles clicking softly in a gesture of confusion. He leaned closer to the viewport, the slight shift of his heavy form barely audible. Perhaps the subject's fragile mind was fracturing faster than anticipated, descending into a premature, self-defeating hysteria. Such cases were rare but not unheard of. But the sound did not subside. It grew. A sharp snort, then a barking peal of delight, then a full-bodied, unrestrained explosion of laughter that echoed and reverberated against the unyielding metal walls of the interrogation chamber. The human threw back its head, its throat working with joyous abandon, roaring with what could only be described as sheer hilarity. Every fresh jolt of agony, every searing pulse of electricity, every needle's prick, each seemed to be transmuted, twisted by some unknowable internal alchemy, into another wave of profound amusement. Tears streamed down its face, glistening streaks in the harsh light, but they were not tears of despair or pain. They were tears of unadulterated, triumphant joy. Cathar, a flicker of something akin to irritation rippling through his cold blood, increased the intensity. The electrical currents flared, making muscles spasm violently, causing delicate skin to blister and char in miniature, precise patterns. Yet, the laughter only intensified, becoming louder, more infectious, more utterly, bewilderingly free. It rolled and boomed, filling the chamber, pressing against the viewport until even the hardened observers behind the reinforced glass shifted uncomfortably, their own alien anatomies registering an unfamiliar disturbance. There was nothing defensive about this sound. It was not hysteria, not a coping mechanism. It was genuine, unrestrained mirth, pure and undiluted. It defied logic, defied Cathar's every understanding of sentient suffering. The sound, the bizarre, unyielding sound, began to spread like a contagion. One of the younger wardens, a junior interrogator named Veklan, twitched involuntarily, his mandibles clicking with an odd, unprecedented rhythm. A strange sound rose, unbidden, from his throat, alien, certainly, but unmistakably, terrifyingly, a choked approximation of laughter. His 6 eyes widened in bewildered horror at his own body's betrayal. Other wardens, rigid and disciplined moments before, followed suit. Nervous titters, like dry leaves scuttling across a metal floor, broke the pristine silence of the control room. Then, tentative giggles, escalating quickly into sharp bursts of mirth. Soon, the chamber, designed for the solemn extraction of information, was filled with sounds no alien language had ever produced. no alien throat had ever intentionally formed. The human, still strapped to the chair, wheezed, clutching its sides as best it could, its entire frame shaking with convulsions of joy. Its voice, though hoarse, was still strong, each burst of laughter sending fresh ripples of the inexplicable phenomenon through the observing aliens. Every frantic attempt by the wardens to reassert control, to suppress the alien sensation that was tearing through their own anatomies, only made their laughter worse. The harder they tried to clamp down, to stifle the bizarre mirth, the more it burst out of them, unfamiliar, uncontrollable, terrifying in its sheer, relentless intensity. It was a complete biological revolt. The contagion, the weaponized amusement, did not stop at the interrogation chamber. It spread, an invisible, virulent wave, throughout the entire facility. In the gleaming, sterile corridors, officers stumbled, clutching their abdomens, gasping for breath between uncontrollable fits of giggling. In the stoic command center, strategic officers bent double, their multi-jointed limbs flailing weakly, choking on helpless hilarity as crucial data screens flickered with ignored warnings. In the barracks, soldiers collapsed onto their bunks, tears streaming from their eyes, their chitinous plates vibrating with the strain of alien guffaws. It was not simply sound, Cather realized with dawning horror. It was something in the air, a rhythm, a primal, inescapable need for the alien brain to mimic, to join, to surrender to this inexplicable human emotion. What had been meticulously designed as a weapon of terror, a precise instrument of psychological warfare, had become an epidemic of pure, unadulterated amusement. Hours later, the interrogation chamber remained in chaos. The human, though its voice was hoarse and its face flushed a deep, alarming red, was still alive, still unbroken, still laughing, a soft, continuous chortle that resonated with a strange, triumphant serenity. Around it, its captors lay scattered. Some were unconscious, their systems overloaded by the sheer physical exertion of uncontrolled mirth. Others still trembled, their bodies occasionally seasoned with helpless, exhausted chuckles, their internal regulation systems struggling to cope with this unprecedented assault. Cathar, chief warden, slowly pushed himself up from where he had collapsed against the viewport. He was gasping, his own body still spasming with residual, unwanted mirth, his mandibles sore from involuntary clenching. He realized, with a dawning horror that froze his cold blood, that they had uncovered a force they could not counter, a weapon that defied all tactical analysis. Not rage, not violence, not even the most potent psychological warfare, but something far stranger, far more insidious. A weapon that, once unleashed, could not be caged. Laughter. The report, when it finally reached the High Council, bypassing countless layers of automated protocol due to its unprecedented urgency, was brief and desperate, its language stripped of all formal precision. Terrors cannot be interrogated. Their madness is infectious. Exposure to their suffering does not break them. It spreads. From that day onward, a new whisper, cold and cautionary, moved through the fleets of the Cathar Dominion. Beware the humans, they warned, who find comedy in agony, whose joy infects the mind like a plague, transforming torment into an unbearable, terrifying mirth.